Welcome to Buying and Beyond, the buying podcast that aims to entertain and inspire. We're Kate and Linz, and together we have over 30 years' experience in retail, including Accessorise and M&S to name a few high street names.
We've been through the highs and the lows, the ups and the downs of fashion retail buying and beyond, and we really want to share this with you.
This is a safe space for us to share our stories, tips and advice, and we have some friends joining us along the way to give us their thoughts and opinions too.
We hope this podcast will help anyone looking to get into the industry, as well as those already enjoying the wild world of retail buying, as many of these stories will hopefully feel very relatable. So grab your drink of choice, sit back and have a giggle with us.
Hi!
Hi!
So we're back. We cannot believe that we're almost through our first season.
Wow.
I mean, partly probably because we've only got 10 episodes, but I think let's start small and manageable, bite-sized chunks.
And then we can up our game.
We hope that you've really enjoyed our modern day mentoring and our hilarious storytelling. At least we think it's funny. On that note, please do keep those stories coming. Anything to do with funny moments, sample mishaps, or just frustrating situations. Jot us a note and send it in to buyingandbeyond@gmail.com or DM us on Instagram at buyingandbeyond. Okay, so today we're going to be chatting about Lindsay.
Let's launch into all things management and stuff they don't teach you.
So managing up, managing down, and just managing to get by.
Absolutely. From when we were first promoted to managers to our own preferred management styles and how to manage both up and down. So there's often no training and you just have to learn on the job.
You just wing it.
Katie, do you remember when you were first told that you're now a manager?
Yeah, do you know what? It was quite early on in the career. I first became a manager after my first promotion from a BAA, Buyer's Admin Assistant, to a Senior Buyer's Admin Assistant, where I was then responsible for managing 2 of the BAAs in the team. So it was quite early to have sort of like responsibilities of sort of managing the workload for the team. Not necessarily managing the development so much, like that still was with, you know, the buyers, but definitely the managing of the kind of the day-to-day aspects and any issues and problems that might come up, because you're kind of the first port of call for anything like that.
Yeah. No, definitely. I do remember it being called Jewellery Boot Camp over in your area.
Jewellery Boot Camp, which isn't just a reflection on myself, I don't think. I think that was just that it was a really well-run team. The buyers on that team were just shit hot. It was one of the biggest departments in the UK, the business, the UK, Europe. It had a huge amount of turnover. It had a huge number of SKUs to manage.
And those buyers were so well thought of, weren't they?
They were so on it. If you're just thinking,
so much pressure to be on that team.
Constant newness, constantly like it was 6 waves a season. So if you think you've got autumn, winter, and then spring, summer, and almost every sort of month to 2 months, so maybe every 6 weeks, you'd have a new drop coming in. And then you'd also be repeating. And it was maybe at a time where sales had been absolutely flying, so you maybe didn't need to be quite so. You didn't need to worry, and sustainability was less of a at the forefront of your mind. So you were placing repeats every single week, weren't you?
Reacting after trade.
You weren't having to back things so much because you needed to ship it because you needed to save money on freight, and actually you didn't want to air freight.
And you're right, the economy was much better. We had a lot of success, so you didn't need to like constantly analyze your decisions. You would just really just go for it,
and you just and you do little and often because you could. Whereas now, I think you'd be a bit more like, oh, air freight's a big decision. Like definitely in the most recent place that I've been at, any air freight decision needed to go to the director, not just buying director, but also finance to get it signed off, to have that agreement. Otherwise, actually, you needed to be buying better up front.
Yeah, which I'm so much more on board with, because air freight is scandalous. Like,
it is from
a
unnecessary
sustainability point of view and a cost point of view.
Unnecessary. And actually a lot of these repeats that we were doing were on core items. Should have just bought better at the very beginning.
Yeah, absolutely.
But no, I do remember that, and I do remember the responsibility of it all. And just very quickly, you don't have any training sessions
to
lead you into that at all.
But you were brilliant at it. I just remember if there was a struggling BAA, they were sent to your team.
Thanks,
to whip
mate.
them into shape.
Thanks, mate.
You know, and the core skill set that you need is organisation.
Yes.
And efficient sort of ways of working. And
Definitely.
I think that's what you probably brought to that team that needed it the most, because it was the sort of central business department.
It was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was what kept everything going round. And I think it was helpful because, I mean, by a senior BAA, you've seen a whole season, you kind of understand what needs to be prioritised, so you can understand how to kind of like put things in order of like, what do we need to focus on today. And also with so many SKUs, so many orders that need to be raised, and actually quite high quantities, you need to be really, you need a real good mix of like accuracy and speed. It wasn't just get them on get them on the system as quickly as possible, but you needed to be accurate with it. But you also needed to make sure like you had deliveries coming in constantly because of all this newness. There would be constant boxes, constant post, and then having to wrap that up for the buyers, and then they might want you, like by senior BA actually, you were already starting to do a little bit of negotiation as well. So you were having to prioritise all of those different tasks. And as a senior BA, you're already taking on extra responsibilities across the buying floor, overseeing all of the BAAs,
like given like little projects to do.
And showing that you can manage and you can do your day job and more, because it's that position that sort of like
pivots you to AB.
But yeah, what about you? What's your kind of lasting memory, or what's your first memory of like a serious kind of like management position?
I think it's one of many, really. I suppose I remember when I worked for a company and I looked after a BAA who was twice my age.
Well, that's different, isn't it?
And it was really interesting because I come from a company where we all started out young and everyone was trying to fight for the next position, you know. But it was really refreshing, in my opinion, to manage someone who was comfortable with not progressing. And also, you know, their targets were more about how can I keep them improving their job and doing their job better and being more efficient at their job. And also I think you sometimes need those people on the team because they keep the team running.
Definitely. And they're not out for themselves. Like, it can get a little cutthroat at times when you're all like,
which is quite healthy,
trying to like get to the next level.
You know, it's quite a healthy mindset to have.
But it's nice to have that stability as well.
It's nice to have like the person that's gonna be the mother or the dad of the team, you know, like, and look after the family.
And
like,
sometimes a buyer can really appreciate just having someone that's just there constantly, has all the knowledge and the know-how.
And the history.
You're not having to train someone up, and
Yeah.
They know exactly what they're doing at all times.
They can be like, yeah, we did that we did that about 15 years ago. We tried that, and
yeah, and they know the systems back, you know, inside out, and all of those extra sort of like all those nuances and things like that you get on systems. They just knew it. They just knew it automatically. One of the places I worked at, we had a similar thing. Not necessarily such a noticeable age difference, because I think that's a really interesting one. How do you, as somebody young and junior, manage somebody that is twice your age? You know, how do you adapt your communication style? But I worked at a place where we had a similar thing in terms of you had your ABs, and they were split between progression ABs, people that wanted to get to the next level, work their way up the ladder, and career ABs who were just really happy doing their job. They loved it, and they were just happy sitting at that point, whether that be because of stage of life, like some of the people maybe you're talking about, or just generally they just felt more comfortable, and they saw the step to buyer as quite like a big jump, and they really loved working in buying but didn't want to be centre stage, which, let's face it, when you're a buyer you are. You know, we've just gone through a sign-off meeting, you are on stage, you know. So that's like, that in itself is quite interesting. I've also had it where I've had people that have have been there at kind of like maybe in their 50s or 60s, and they've had a career, and they've wanted to come into a role that is admin based, which is great. So you've got them as an admin assistant, and they're great at like data input.
Yeah.
But they don't want to do any more than that.
Yeah.
And they just want to come in 9 till 5 and then like go home.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all well and good. It is hard when you're doing your appraisals to be like, okay, so what objective should we set for the next year? And they're like, I don't really want an objective. Like, I don't feel like I
don't need to hit a target. I don't need to do this, that, and the other.
And they're like, okay, like you say, how do you then just sort of change it to be like, okay, well, how do you stay motivated day to day?
Yeah.
How can we keep this going? And they're like, well, there's no extra projects I want to take on. I have no aspirations to grow.
Yeah.
I just want to come in and do what I want, and I don't even really want this meeting right now because...
But I think it's just important to try and like find out what makes them tick.
Find a way to engage them.
Yeah.
But it can be difficult, and you need to change your style. And just generally, I mean, you do just need to adapt your communication style depending on who you're talking to.
I think those people are really good for training on systems, and like they can be the what do we used to call them? Super user. A super user. You know, when new people start, so you can think about things like that. So I think as a manager, when you've got people at different levels wanting to achieve different things, that's also when your creative brain comes into, you know. So managing people is such a big part of the role, especially when you get further up. So you start to take it on at a little level low down, and then it becomes more and more and more part of your role as you get right to the top, which obviously sounds really quite obvious.
Each level.
But it becomes huge, doesn't it? Because you are your team. Yeah. I remember someone saying that to me, you are your team. And I've taken that with me. I mean, I might have even mentioned that before, sorry, apologies. I'd like to repeat myself. But I think they're completely right. Let's always make sure I've not rushing to fill a vacancy like that because I need to fill it. I'm trying to find the right person for the team because you are your team.
Yeah, definitely. Like you say, like each level presents like more challenges or new challenges. You've got more people. You know, you've got more great coaching opportunities, but you have more stress too. And it's like, I think we've talked about this before, you can become a bit of a therapist.
Oh my God.
You know, because often one-to-ones aren't a to-do list. It's how are you doing? How are you feeling? Understanding your team, not just as a cog in the wheel of processes, but actually as a person.
I think that's why a lot of people go on and become life coaches, you know?
Yeah.
Because, you know, that I'm really fascinated by the life coaching industry. I think it's amazing, and I think that it's kind of links in with what we want to do with our modern day mentoring, really, because it's so nice that people now can reach out and have that forum. Like, it's not, you know, medical therapy, but it is a way to help people with anxiety and, you know, trying to help you achieve what you want to achieve, and that's kind of what you're doing as a manager in buying. Trying to help people get what they want to achieve.
People are getting so stuck in their own heads, and it can be really hard to see the wood for the trees. And sometimes you just need someone to point it out for you.
100%.
But it's funny when you think about all the years trainings like psychologists and counsellors and ever have, and we just wing it.
I know. It's quite dangerous, really.
It is. And
I do think that is a point, though, because we've both experienced terrible managers. I mean, never going to name names, and you know, I mean, to backtrack there a little bit, like, you don't get taught anything, so of course there's going to be people that can't manage, or maybe not can't manage, but like aren't very
aren't set up
good,
for it. Maybe it's not in their skill set.
What they need to get.
It doesn't come naturally to them.
Yeah,
I did actually go on a really good training course at one of my companies called Be That Manager, and it was kind of, I can't remember how many weeks it was. I'm going to say 8 because it was something between 6 and 12, but I'm going to go with 8 sessions. And they were group sessions, and you were mixed up with people from all different functions and different levels, and it was all about understanding how to manage somebody and manage them best, and adapt your communication style.
Yeah.
And I found that's so interesting. Like, it was all focused on like thinking about how, like, well, not all of it, like there were different sessions for different reasons and different people taking on different roles, and you learn a lot about yourself, as well as like how you should react or how you can interact with other people. And one of the big pieces of information I think that I got, or key takeaway, shall we say, is, think about how the information that you're sharing is being received. So how does that person that you're talking to like to receive information?
Oh, interesting.
Are they straight to the point, or do they like supporting facts and figures? You know, thinking about those personality types, back to that colour wheel. But think about how that person, how do they respond when you give them certain bits of information, and flex your style.
Yeah.
Depending. So it's not about giving somebody the information how you would like to give it or receive it. It's all about how that's being how you communicate it to them to get the result that you need.
That sounds like a really interesting course.
Do you know what? It was fascinating.
I love it when companies have put on stuff like that, but you still have to be proactive with that, though, don't you? You have to be like, oh, there's a course.
You've still got to drive your own development.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Oh, there's a course on this. I'd love to go on it.
Definitely. And by the time that I had that, I was quite senior, managing quite a large team. And I could really have done with that earlier. It would have benefited so much. But I didn't just keep it to myself. I told my team about it, and I was like, you need to go on this course.
Yeah, it's great.
Because I'll interpret it in a different way to how you will.
Yeah.
Because I've got different management needs. But I think it's an essential thing for all of us to go on.
Yeah.
I think it's also interesting just to touch on, I guess, things like companies are better at the moment at sort of understanding or addressing people's sort of mental health.
Yeah, I think some have got a long way to go with it.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's an element of like, people are sometimes more likely to bring problems to work, and I think that there needs to be a balance. Like, we need to be good at identifying signs, because let's face it, since the pandemic and stuff, more people are finding social situations and situations in life a lot harder.
Yeah.
I think, there's quite a bit of research on that. I think that's known. But I think also we need to remember that work is work. So it's a really good balance, of getting to know a person, but also it's a company, it's a business. The purpose is to make money, and you can't carry dead weights. As harsh as that sounds,
that does sound very harsh.
I mean, I remember when I was at Senior BA, and I had an interview for an AB level, and I had just broken up with my boyfriend of 6 years or something, and we were living together, and I'd broken up with him, and I'd moved out of the flat at exactly the same sort of time that I was doing my project for my interview.
Oh God, the projects. The projects for interviews were just nuts, weren't they?
Yeah. And so I was juggling. I couldn't move all the way home because I couldn't afford, because I still needed to get to work. I couldn't rent somewhere new because I was still paying rent on the place I just moved out of. I moved in with a friend and her parents.
Oh my God.
And then had to do this interview prep. But I just carried on. Like, that was private. That was my business. But it got round, because obviously you share it with friends, and it had got round, and I remember one of the buyers pulling me to one side and saying, you can't use that as an excuse, and you're not going to be looked at more favourably.
Joking.
And I was like, oh, I wouldn't dare. I wasn't going to.
Yeah,
I would
that's
never
really quite harsh.
I wasn't asking for an extension. Like,
no.
I was just carrying on as normal, and I didn't expect any of that. It really took me by surprise, and I don't think anyone would dare say something like that these days.
No, gosh, no.
And it also just shows, like, bring yourself to work, but also, like, there's sometimes you can feel a little bit vulnerable when everybody knows your business.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, though, because COVID has brought about a lot of different social situations, and companies do need to face into that. They do need to face into the fact that we were locked in our houses for a long time. The planet's never the planet. We haven't seen that kind of social behaviour like for probably a very, 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 very long time, and that's going to bring about a lot of social anxieties. So there has to be this whole work from home movement is really interesting for that, isn't it? Because I think that companies that have been really hesitant to bring that on board are just not addressing that that social pandemic. Like it has made people very, very anxious and very, very withdrawn, and working from home really helps with that. And don't get me wrong, there's obviously people out there that really ruin it for everyone else, and I get that, and there has to be an element of trust there with companies, but there also has to be that element of understanding that people have developed these phobias, so there's I suppose what I'm trying to say is being a manager now is very difficult. It really is, and there's a lot to tackle, and I think that it's so important that we do all get a bit more training.
I think it would be even harder if it was a fully remote working role as well.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of hybrid, because
me too.
You can't tell how someone really is when you have a Teams call.
Yeah,
like you can't pick up body language, and there's a bit of a delay.
Yeah,
there is nothing better than having that one-to-one in person.
I agree.
And I think if you're struggling as well with phobias and things like that, actually getting out and putting yourself out of the comfort zone can, in the long term, help, but it can be really, really difficult. But I do think it's really important to have your one-to-ones in person, and I think it's important to keep your one-to-ones consistent.
Yeah.
And I think it can be really hard.
Yeah, don't keep cancelling those one-to-ones, because it just throws people off.
Yeah. It's really frustrating, and I think it can be really alienating for the team. And I think sometimes it does just drop down, and I get it, like busy life. Yeah. Like it's so
or
hard
other
to keep on top of
priorities. Retail is so, as we said before, so erratic at the moment, and so much pressure on companies to stay in the market. The workload is at its maximum in most businesses. Everybody I talk to is, a lot of people have had to, make some cost savings. So there's a hell of a lot of pressure on people. So even more of a reason to just keep those one-to-ones in there, because
keep them short and regular.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think otherwise you run the risk of people feeling like you just don't care at all. And people need to want to work with you and want to, you want to keep them engaged.
Making them feel supported as well. And they work for you, but your role is in some ways to give them the support so they can support you. It's kind of a bit of a circle, isn't it?
It does,
really?
Yeah. It's a whole support system, isn't it? And I think even if people don't need a catch up, like I've definitely had buyers that have sort of said, "Oh, I don't need my one-to-one this week." You might not think you need it, but often a chat is just a really good time just to like build those relationships and just check in on them. Yeah. And as we've said, it's a personality, like it's checking in on them personally as well as productivity wise. But I think, yes, there might be one or two occasions where someone might say, "Oh, I don't need a one-to-one this week," or you can say, "Oh, do you need your one-to-one this week?" I get that, but it's you do need to try and maintain an element of consistency of it all.
Absolutely.
So what kind of styles of management have you learnt from and or admired over the years?
Oh, wow. What kind of styles have I learnt from?
I know that I've really enjoyed the responsibility of it. I don't think I had realised quite how hard it could be at first. I remember being asked in an interview, what kind of a manager are you?
Oh, that's such a typical question, isn't it?
And I was like, I'm firm but fair.
That's a textbook answer.
Honestly, I know. And I was told it was too cliche.
Yeah, no, that's.
And she was just like, it's so cliche. And I was like, okay, but it's true. Like,
yeah,
you do. You have to kind of stand by your beliefs and stand by your guns. But there's no need to push it too far.
Yeah, I think for me, it's about being relatable and approachable. So I have not benefited, let me turn that question around. I've not benefited from management styles for me that have made me feel really fearful of them, because I won't bring a problem to them and then it just gets bigger and escalates, especially when you're junior, because you don't want to look like you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So I that's always stayed with me, to make sure that I feel like they can come to me with anything, and it's a safe space, and they're not going to be judged by it. I'm going to help them with it, within reason, obviously.
Not a fan of the tough love.
Not really a fan of a tough love.
Me either.
I mean,
don't push me. Don't push me. Encourage me. I like encouragement.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
But I mean, there is a place for tough love, though. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we should all go and sit in a circle and hold hands and sing songs.
No, but I think it depends how you interpret tough love.
Yeah.
Right? Because tough love to me is just like telling me to just effing get on with it,
Mm-hmm.
or just barking at me,
Mm-hmm.
or pushing me to do something that I really don't feel comfortable, or
Mm-hmm.
telling me that something I have done is not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
I am so much more receptive if you're like, give me words of encouragement. That's great. Why don't you try and do it like this next time?
Yeah.
Or have you thought about doing it like this? Or this could be even better if.
Shit sandwich.
Not even a shit sandwich. Don't give me the shit. Just give me a sandwich.
But like a positive, a negative, and a positive. Like I think that's what when I first experienced that as a junior, that really, really sort of sent me in a different direction with my confidence. And then when I moved and had a bit more of a kind of approachable and encouraging manager, I was like, this is what everyone should do. I don't understand why we need to be so negative and so. And I get that we were junior quite a long while ago, where it was a world of being quite bolshy and quite harsh and quite like, who shouts the loudest wins kind of thing. But again, the world's changed, and you need to be much more of an adaptable and open-minded thinker. You've got a different generation joining this industry now as well. So, yeah, I think I much prefer being encouraged, and I much prefer to be the one encouraging, and giving them as much time as I possibly can. But at the same time, recognising where that's appreciated. So if I've got someone that doesn't appreciate that, then don't get me wrong, I'm quite tough with them, because why would I put myself out to help someone that is not pulling their weight or putting the effort in, or going that extra mile to get where they need to be.
Yeah, you can't just rely on an expectation that your manager's going to do everything for you.
No, absolutely not. And then you just gain that nice respect level, and then people want to work on your team. Like, I think that's when one of the most empowering, or couple of empowering moments in my career have been A, when I've got people promoted, and B, when I've heard from someone, oh, so-and-so wishes they could be on your team, they want to work for you, like that's such
that's so nice
like
to hear.
Motivation and a reason why we're doing this, a reason why we take some of the crap that we have to deal with. But yeah, so I think motivational, inspiring, encouraging,
And lining your goals. Yeah, making sure that you're checking in on their development, and you're supporting them with everything. And PDRs is one that we should probably just mention really quickly. I think that's really important, and they can so easily just get left, can't they? Like, you just suddenly you look at them every year, and suddenly like a week before, you're like, oh God, what's my PDR like?
Yeah. What were my objectives?
Yeah,
back in 1972?
What were my objectives? And I just think it's really important, like, to find some time to, just choose a one-to-one every sort of, I don't know, once a quarter.
Yeah.
Just to check in on them, like, so just more than once a year,
I quite often put in development meetings. So with certain people that are really on a path for development, we wouldn't just have one-to-ones. One-to-ones are just like go through your to-do list, whereas a development meeting is about your development, obviously.
Well, a one-to-one is more of a check-in on somebody. It's not just a to-do list, is it?
Yeah, but in terms of like, you wouldn't necessarily, if you can separate the development conversation from the one-to-one, then that can be just focused on development and not anything else.
Yeah, I think I totally agree. Have a separate conversation about just development. You have your to-do list of just where you are, but also just like, you need to be checking in on somebody on just how they are as a person as well. And as you say, like, are they still the same as in 1997 or 1977 or whatever you said? But, are they still appropriate? Like, how are they tracking on them? Like, are they close to achieving them, are they even still relevant? And I think gives the team a real boost to see that their progression is being checked in on.
Yeah, for sure.
So what are the key skills that we think that we need as a manager?
So, key skills. I think one of the most important things is prioritization, because it's one of the most fast-paced industries I think I know of, really. You need to make sure that you are teaching this to your team members, the skill of prioritization, because that way they then learn how to do that for themselves. And you know if something quick, if a task that comes in by management or the senior team, that they've got the other bits in the right order, and they can drop those things and then take on that task, and then not drop the ball with everything else. So I think that's really, really important. Creating a safe space for confidence as well, as we've talked about. Handling confrontational situations as well. My God. I'm not the best at that, if I'm going to be honest. It's something that I don't enjoy. I think some people enjoy it.
I was going to say, I don't think many people do, but there are some people that love a challenge and a debate.
Yeah, they do. But I think the way that I manage confrontation is trying to, again, just like the approach of listening to someone. So let's talk about this difficult
Let them
problem.
feel like they've been heard.
Yeah. And then turning it around and saying, well, how would you have done that differently? What would you think that you could have done to change that? I'm just trying to think of an example in my head where I've had to do...
While you're thinking, shall we have some retail therapy?
Shall we? Okay, cool.
Right, what do we have? Okay, so one about a manager here. This is actually quite nice and lighthearted, I think.
Oh, really?
So I had a buyer who was super lovely, but she was also batshit cray. I'd have one-to-ones with her and walk in all prepared as a BAA, her a junior buyer. And she'd be like, so what's the 411? And I'd be like, what's the 411? Like, what's the down low? Like, I was like, okay, what, in life or work? She'd be like, yeah, both. It's always an odd start to the conversation, but we move. And on many occasions, as we worked on the jewellery team, and would often have one-to-ones in the jewellery sample room, she would pick up one of the silver diamante rings and say to me, pretend we haven't seen each other in ages. And she would then sit there with a ring on her finger, moving her hand around to display it, while I would then have to exclaim, wow, oh my God, are you engaged?
No way!
And she'd be like, yeah, flinging her hand around some more. And I'd be like, wow, oh, how did he propose? And she'd tell me an extravagant story of the proposal. It would change most times to something more and more opulent and fantastical. It would usually take a good 10 to 15 minutes of the role play before we'd even get to my one-to-one, and would often be over because she'd have another meeting to go to. And that would be before I'd really got to what I wanted to talk about.
No.
It's funny to look back on now, but at the time it was so frustrating.
Oh, that's brilliant. I love it.
It's so good, isn't it?
What theatrics?
I know, and on the note of theatrics, that has been quite a preachy one. A quite passionate one. I mean, we're people, aren't we?
Yeah, like you said, hitting the nail on the head, we're very passionate about this topic, and I think that it's very much why we wanted to start this podcast, because we feel really strongly for making people feel like they can have a voice and be inspired and supported, and not to like lose your confidence. Like, I think a lot of people leave the industry because they've had their I think a lot of people leave the industry because they've had their confidence damaged, and actually they're bloody brilliant buyers and they should be in it, and we need to just basically
build each other up, not tear each other down.
Absolutely. Make the world a better place.
So these are 3 things that we would encourage managers to do. But obviously, with experience, you will adopt your own style.
Okay, number 1. Check in, show up, and be present for your team. You will gain their respect. Number 2, adapt your communication style depending on who you're talking with to get the best result. And number 3, align your goals. You are your team. There's no I in team. If they're performing, then you're performing.
I love that. Well, as we said, that was quite preachy. So let's have more fun in our last episode and remind ourselves why we love buying. Bye.
Bye. If you've enjoyed listening to this episode, please, please, please like and subscribe and leave a review.
And if you already have, thank you, thank you, thank you. We all need a bit of retail therapy, and this is the perfect time for you to offload about that super cringeworthy story. We would love to hear from you all, your funny stories and experiences, or even any dilemmas. And maybe we can help, or at least find someone who can. And don't worry, we will keep these anonymous and remove any names and brands.
We would also love to hear from you on any topics you would like us to talk about. Please send all of these into buyingandbeyond@gmail.com or drop us a DM via our Instagram page @buyingandbeyond. Kate, are you a drama queen?
No.
Drama just makes things interesting.
That's true.
All these thoughts and opinions are our own and based on our own experiences working for a wide variety of retailers. These are all in the hope to entertain and educate, and not to reflect negatively on any place we currently or have previously worked.